entire Video Tours library is available for purchase by corporations, educators, and individuals.
Water. It covers more than 2/3 of the Earth's surface and supports more forms of life than marine biologists have been able to count. If you could pick just one spot to explore this aquatic wonderland, you'd do well to pick this one, California's Monterey Bay. Here, 100 miles south of San Francisco, a fabulous wilderness exists, just yards offshore. A wilderness that was once invisible to all but the most adventuresome, but now it is visible to all who come to a remarkable place, the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The Monterey Bay Aquarium lives up to its name. It's a truly regional aquarium, featuring an extraordinary number of different living things, all of which thrive in this spectacular 15-mile-wide bay. The reason for such diversity can be found in the number of different marine habitats within a few hundred yards of one another. This one-of-a-kind regional aquarium is a showcase for the area's inhabitants and their habitats. The bay's most spectacular geographic feature can't be seen from land. Just a few hundred yards offshore, the ocean floor drops off into a mighty undersea canyon that stretches 50 miles out into the Pacific.
If there were no water in Monterey Bay, people would come here to take mule rides down into the submarine canyon instead of to watch sea otters and gray whales. The canyon is about as deep and large as the Grand Canyon of Arizona and would be equally spectacular. It's important because it acts as a funnel that brings cold, nutrient-rich water into the bay that fertilizes the abundant sea life here.
Long before the aquarium was built, Monterey Bay was world famous for its abundance of sea life. By the 1930s, a seemingly endless supply of sardines had given rise to a number of large canneries here. In turn, Cannery Row attracted a steady stream of immigrant workers. For years, this silver harvest had no bounds. At its peak in 1945, nearly 250 million tons of sardines were caught and processed. But then, unexpectedly, due to intense overfishing, the sardines disappeared, and eventually, so did the canneries. The largest, the Hovden Cannery, was the last to go. It closed its doors on an entire era in 1972. The site where the Hovden once thrived was far from forgotten. Where a fish cannery once stood, the Monterey Bay Aquarium now stands as a showcase for life. The result of 7 years of dreaming, designing, and building that created an aquarium unlike any other ever built before. The largest of the spectacular aquatic exhibits will hold nearly 1/3 gallons of water, with giant acrylic windows up to 7 inches thick. The aquarium's complex life support systems would eventually include miles of custom-designed plumbing. But behind all this massive effort was an even greater challenge.
From the outset, our plan was to take the aquarium visitor on a tour of the major living communities of Monterey Bay. In order to bring pieces of these communities into the aquarium, we knew we would have to pump large amounts of raw seawater from the bay.
The same water that supports life in the bay would have to support life in the aquarium. unfiltered and unchanged. By pumping this unfiltered water directly into the exhibits, the aquarium's designers were able to provide viewers with a look at creatures living in thoroughly realistic habitats. However, the single largest challenge wasn't exhibiting live fish, but live plants. On the surface of the bay, you can see the leafy canopy of a California kelp forest. From above, it's hardly a wonder, but below the surface, you'll find a true forest, as stately as any grove on land. Today, the aquarium's exhibit centerpiece is its remarkable kelp forest.
When this project was first initiated, many people asked the question, why exhibit seaweed? Who really cares? The reason is that scuba divers flock to this area and have for many years because the kelp forests of the California coast are one of the most fabulous places you could scuba dive anywhere in the entire world.
How's everybody doing?
In this kelp forest, you can talk to a diver who will tell you these giant plants are capable of growing 8 inches or more a day. Common as they are in the sea, giant kelp represented a whole new set of unknowns to aquarium designers.
None of us were really sure if that was going to work because nobody had really tried growing the giant kelp in an exhibit of that size. So that was a little risky to design a whole exhibit around one species, but it turned out better than we even hoped.
A kelp forest produces more nutrients per acre than an Iowa cornfield or a tropical rainforest. But unlike the trees in a land forest, kelp absorbs food over its entire surface. In the sea, nutrients are provided by constantly moving water. To reproduce the ocean's powerful surges, a special wave machine had to be designed and built. Kelp provides shelter from predators for smaller fish. However, as elsewhere in nature, every living thing here eventually becomes a link in the food chain. Kelp crabs and turban snails nibble the live plants, and in turn, the nibblers will get nibbled themselves. In this exhibit, many species that would usually devour one another in the ocean swim side by side, thanks to feedings that ensure the aquarium residents have plenty to eat and leave visitors plenty to see.
Hey, that was my finger, Bubba. Give me a break.
Like wildlife elsewhere, many underwater creatures have made remarkable adaptations to their environment. With their small mouths and flattened bodies, surf perches are able to probe the cracks and crevices that often conceal a meal. By blending in with the bottom, the gopher rockfish finds a home and food near the rocky seafloor. Here are some creatures that are not so hard to spot. California sea otters swimming in the kelp of Monterey Bay. Their ancestors once lived on land. Now, these relatives of the weasel live entirely in the water.
They're fascinating because the environment they live in is so harsh at certain times, the wet, the coldness. It just seems like it's a real challenge for them to survive out there, and they do it.
See?
These playful creatures were rescued after being orphaned as young pups. Their rambunctious behavior delights visitors. But all this rubbing and rolling is actually good grooming and essential to their survival. Unlike other marine mammals, the otter doesn't have a protective layer of blubber, but does have the thickest fur of any animal, up to 1 million hairs per square inch. When this pelt is clean, it traps insulating air. This keeps an otter warm in the coldest waters. Survival in the cold sea also means an otter must consume up to 1/4 of its body weight every 24 hours. A person would have to eat more than 100 hamburgers a day to keep up, leaving otter mums among the sea's busiest creatures.
When the pup is born, it weighs 4 to 5 pounds, and basically it's helpless. The mother will put it on her chest, and that's how they'll move around.
This helpless orphan was only a day and a half old when she was brought here. The around-the-clock effort by the staff and 56 volunteers paid off. She became the first orphaned otter ever to be raised from birth in an aquarium. The aquarium regularly nurses injured or abandoned marine mammals and birds back to health. The final goal of this care and effort is to return healthy creatures to the wild. But the great majority of the aquarium's residents are permanent and come here as part of an ongoing effort to collect species from the bay. Dave Powell oversees the collecting activities.
The best challenge is to bring in and display an animal that has really never been kept in an aquarium before, and ultimately to have that animal reproduce, which is an indication that it's happy and doing well.
Different animals require different strategies. This collector is using a bit of sea urchin as bait. Every animal you see here had to be collected by hand, down to the tiniest specimen. Once they've been brought to the aquarium, they find themselves in something very close to their original home.
Here he goes. See how big he is here? There he goes. Holy mackerel. Holy. Here's one right here. You want to touch it?
Throughout the aquarium, you'll find a total of 10 different marine habitats. Perhaps the most surprising habitat to find is the sandy shore aviary. Here, the relationship between the sea and the land is framed in a vignette reproducing the nearby shoreline and the interaction between birds, plants, and sea life. The Monterey Bay Habitats exhibit displays a series of the bay's habitats, showing the sequence in which a fish would encounter them swimming from sea toward shore. At least 100 to 400 feet down lie the deep reefs. In the exhibit, you can see the ocean floor apparently covered with plants. In fact, what you're seeing is a world of amazing animals. These, for example, are white-plumed sea anemones. They spend their lives anchored to a rock waiting for food to pass by. Aquarium divers periodically feed them a rich meal of plankton.
Look over there. Look at this guy.
See him?
In this fish-eat-fish world, creatures like the lingcod and the wolf eel flourish. Hardly a wolf and not really an eel, this fierce-looking fish has jaws strong enough to bite through the hard shell of a crab. Shrimp abound, but so do their predators. Forays in search of dinner are usually followed by a hasty retreat. Just above the reefs, crowds of rockfish gather. You might think their red color would make them stand out, signaling a hungry predator. Now look again. As you go deeper, the water filters all red out of the sunlight, and the colors almost disappear. The sandy seafloor, another bay habitat. In stark contrast to the reefs, it at first might seem a barren plain, but here too, you'll find surprises. Another expert in camouflage, the sand dab can change its appearance to match the seafloor's different colors and patterns. Beachcombers know the skeleton of the sand dollar, but these are living specimens, capturing food in their velvety coat, made up of hundreds of tiny tube feet. These brittle stars are also mistaken for plants, until food appears and thousands of waving arms swing into action. Some of the smallest creatures can also be the most spectacular. In the Shale Reef exhibit, the aquarium offers a startling close look. These reefs are covered in color: strawberry anemones, blue sponges, and orange cup corals. The reefs are also home to snapping shrimp that burrow deep inside the porous rock. To create another habitat found closer to shore, Pilings from an old pier were taken, with live barnacles and mussels still attached, then relocated inside, creating the wharf, a fascinating example of sea creatures adapting something built by humans to their own specialized needs. Protection provided by the piers becomes an ideal family environment for the surf perch, one of the few species of fish that give birth to live young. One creature that doesn't need protection is this predator from the past. Sharks and their ancestors have been cruising these oceans for 400 million years. The most primitive are the seven-gill sharks. Like all sharks, it is one of nature's most efficient feeding machines. However, the seven-gill shark can never stop cruising, since it requires a constant flow of water to breathe. The bay is also home to dozens of other sharks, all able to locate meals by detecting electrical impulses in the body of their prey. For smaller fish, such as mackerel or anchovies, strength in numbers is the rule and schooling is the game. Marine biologists always thought the safest place in the school was in the center. New research shows that's exactly where predators aim their attack. As it turns out, the sidelines may be the best place to play the game of survival. Here, all species ultimately depend on creatures called plankton that drift throughout the ocean. It's estimated that phytoplankton produce up to half of all the oxygen on this earth, and plankton are the very first link in the open sea's complex food chain. These moon jellies are zooplankton. Their ghostly bodies can grow larger than a person's hand and are 99% water. In some exhibits, divers play an important role. Tiny spores and larvae of seaweeds and barnacles ride in with unfiltered seawater and attach themselves to the windows. The divers who carefully remove them are part of a team of over 500 volunteers who help make the Monterey Bay Aquarium so spectacular.
What I have here is a bat star. And notice in the center that stuff sticking out there? That is the stomach of this starfish. How about that? Now, a starfish is a very unique animal. It does not put food in its mouth. It puts its stomach on the food.
Paul Kroonquist is one of those volunteers.
The idea we have here is to get people involved with the actual animals that are living in the water out here in the bay. And that, to me, is great.
This volunteer domain is known as the touch pool.
It's fabulous. It's a learning experience. You can touch the animals, you have contact with them.
Another touchable exhibit offers a first-hand encounter with a bat ray. These relatives of the shark family are usually known as stingrays. However, these gentle creatures have had their stingers removed. In the kelp lab, microscopes turn the tiniest secrets of the kelp forest into a larger-than-life experience. In this hands-on exhibit, you can guide a video camera among the sea life of the rocky shore's habitat. The wave crash exhibit features life on the very edge of the sea, where pounding waves are rich in food and oxygen. On the bay side of the aquarium, what looks like a natural encounter between rock and sea is actually a product of human ingenuity, the great tide pool.
Many of the plants and animals that live here don't know that this is an artificial environment. And Max the harbor seal really combines the two worlds. He comes and goes from the tide pool at will. Max is doing flipper slaps, which means he is telling us that he's amorously inclined. And either he thinks I'm a female seal or he wishes I were.
Seals and sea lions live in the sea and on land. Though they're not members of the aquarium's permanent population, they are residents of the bay, and you're likely to spot them lounging on rocks not far from the aquarium. The monarch of marine mammals is also a frequent visitor to Monterey Bay. Though they're so large, they're much too much to house here, as you can see by standing underneath one of the aquarium's life-sized models. How big is a whale, you ask? Well, let me tell you. A nursing calf can drink up to 130 gallons of its mother's milk in a day and can grow as much as 26 pounds in an hour.
These kids look great in these whale bodies, and these heads are nice kid heads, but I don't think they're going to make it as whale heads. Should we give them some whale heads?
Though the entire aquarium has been designed to provide visitors with an enjoyable learning experience, it also offers special educational programs for groups that range from students to scientific experts.
This orca head has a nice bump here, and that bump is filled with fat. Now, I don't want to say that you're a fathead, but you use this thing is called a melon, and that melon helps direct sound for his echolocation, so you can find...
The Monterey Bay Aquarium also conducts valuable marine research to help shed light on life in the bay. For Tom Williams, veterinarian, taking care of the sea otters provides an ongoing opportunity for research.
We've learned how to raise them from babies by analyzing the food and feeding them by bottle.
Each week, Tom gives these sea otters a checkup.
You feel all right? You're hydrated and everything. Okay. Is your coat okay? Huh? Your eyes are bright? From just feeling him, I can check and make sure the coat or the pelage is not matted up, and we can go on and get a really good idea of what the health of these animals are.
One of the most important aspects of maintaining healthy populations throughout the aquarium is diet. Peter Ferrante, the aquarium's food technician, calls himself maître d' to the fish.
Our sea otters are our pickiest animals. They have to have real fresh food, and they get picky. They want to have just what they want to have out of several different items.
Since those items include abalone and crab, it can cost up to $8,000 a year just to feed one sea otter. Other delicacies on Peter's menu include shrimp, squid, and clams. To make sure the large fish are eating properly, Peter uses a vitamin supplement.
We put this right into their food, and that way the animal never knows it's there.
Not every meal is quite so easy. For example, how do you feed an octopus? By hand. Here, Randy Hamilton has his hands full, playing waiter to an 8-armed diner.
We'll feed them anchovies, herring, smelt. They're a very social animal, contrary to popular belief. They're very friendly and sociable. In fact, they enjoy being played with.
Octopuses have homes or dens, usually under a rock. But when they need to flee, an octopus can become an escape artist that would make a magician jealous.
The only thing that limits the size at which they can get into a hole or a crevice is the size of their beak. That's the only hard part in their body. So this octopus here is a 60-pound octopus, and it can get into a hole that's maybe 2 inches in diameter.
This strange-looking creature is a relative of the octopus. The cuttlefish, too, uses tentacles to hunt. As more is learned about remarkable Monterey Bay, the aquarium itself is changing, always discovering new challenges, always adding new species to the displays. To explore the great deep reaches of the bay, the aquarium has helped fund a research expedition using a one-person submarine capable of diving 2,000 feet. specimens being gathered in the Deep Rover's so-called slurp gun are for research. Future exhibits may recreate the almost inaccessible deep canyon habitat. The exhibits will require solving several major problems: illuminating species that can tolerate almost no visible light, sheltering creatures that can withstand almost no temperature variation, and many more. But whenever problems have been solved, the aquarium will begin solving others. The Deep Canyon is just one of many future exhibits taking shape here that will reveal more and more of the ocean's secrets. From the bottom of one of the deepest canyons on Earth to the fragile water world on the ocean's edge, the incredible diversity of life is ultimately interconnected. At the Monterey Bay Aquarium, we discover it's also linked to those of us who dwell on land.
It's very understandable that people aren't aware of the connection between our terrestrial environment, the Earth's atmosphere, and the sea. But those connections are very fundamental. If folks were to take a harder look, they'd find that in many ways, exploration of the deep sea is just as fascinating and even more important than exploration of the moon and the planets.
What began as a dream among a handful of marine biologists is today reflected in a sea of curious and delighted faces. In a relatively short span, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has become both a California landmark and a national scientific treasure. The many visitors who experience its wonders each year have come face to face with the last, perhaps greatest, frontier on Earth. The dream of the aquarium, its founders, planners, and builders, the dream of its large and diverse staff, becomes the dream of all who visit, and take with them a new appreciation of the great undersea wilderness called Monterey Bay.
The entire Video Tours library is available for purchase by corporations, educators, and individuals.